Block 1. The scent of pine and frost clung to the air as I slipped through the forest, my footsteps barely audible against the cushion of fallen leaves. 10 years of silence had taught me to move like a ghost, to exist without leaving traces. 10 years of pretending to be mute had trained me to communicate without sound, to express without exposing the one thing that could destroy everything I'd built, my voice. Winter was settling over the Packlands, and with it came the claiming ceremony preparations. The great hall buzzed with activity as I entered through the servants' entrance, my head bowed as always. No one paid attention to the mute girl with pale blonde hair who cleaned the floors and served the meals. I was invisible by design, forgettable by necessity. "Arya, there you are." Hannah, the head kitchen maid, gestured frantically toward a stack of plates. "The Alpha delegations arrived tonight." "Everything must be perfect," I nodded, reaching for my worn apron hanging on the wooden peg by the door. My grandmother's silver pendant swung from my neck as I bent forward, the only possession I'd managed to keep when I fled my home pack a decade ago. The crescent moon etched into its surface had nearly worn smooth from my nervous habit of rubbing it between my fingers when anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. Grandmother had pressed it into my palm the night she died, whispering, "Your voice is your power, little one. Guard it well." If only she could see me now. The kitchen was chaos, wolves in human form rushing to prepare for the most significant event of the year. The claiming ceremony brought together unmated wolves from all packs, but this year was special. This year, the Alpha King himself would be present, searching for his mate after years of solitude following the death of his intended bride. I kept my eyes down as I arranged delicate china plates in precise formations, my hands steady despite the tremor in my heart. 10 years ago, I had run from my fate as a rare Omega wolf, one whose voice could soothe even the most savage alpha rage, one who would be claimed and used as a political pawn. 10 years of pretending to be a beta with damaged vocal cords, worthless in the hierarchical world of werewolf politics. "Did you hear?" whispered Mira, a young kitchen helper whose excitement made her practically vibrate beside me. "The Alpha King has never taken another mate because they say he's waiting for an Omega. They're so rare now, almost extinct." I nearly dropped the crystal goblet in my hand, catching it at the last moment. Mira didn't notice my reaction, too caught up in her gossip. "They say he can sense an Omega from miles away. That's why he's touring all the packs suddenly." Her eyes gleamed with romantic notions. Imagine being claimed by Alaric Grey himself. I could imagine it all too well. That's why I'd been running my entire adult life. The afternoon slipped away in a flurry of preparations. By dusk, the great hall had transformed into a glittering showcase of power and wealth. Crystal chandeliers dripped with light, long tables groaned under silver platters, and the scent of roasted meats and spiced wine perfumed the air. I moved along the periphery, straightening tablecloths and polishing already spotless surfaces, trying to remain unnoticed. Hannah thrust a serving tray into my hands. "The delegations have arrived. You'll be serving the high table tonight." My blood froze. The high table meant proximity to alphas, to their heightened senses and scrutiny. I shook my head frantically, gesturing toward the kitchens. "Don't be ridiculous," Hannah scoffed. "You're the neatest server we have, and you won't embarrass us by chattering." "It's decided." I clutched my grandmother's pendant through my dress, feeling its familiar edges press into my palm. 10 years of safety threatened by a single night of bad luck. The great doors swung open and the procession began. First came our pack's Alpha, Magnus, with his mate Victoria. Behind them streamed the visiting Alpha pairs, each adorned in their pack's colors and insignias. I kept my eyes lowered, focusing on the polished floor as I took my position against the wall, tray balanced expertly in my trembling hands. A hush fell over the room. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my skin with sudden weight. Even without looking, I knew who had entered, could feel the shift in energy like a physical touch. Alpha King Alaric Grey. Against my better judgment, I allowed myself a glance. He stood in the doorway, taller than any man had a right to be, his shoulders broad beneath a black formal jacket. His hair was the color of midnight, swept back from a face that seemed carved from stone, all sharp angles and uncompromising lines. But it was his eyes that caught and held me. Even from across the room, I could see they were the silver of a winter moon, cold and searching. Those eyes swept the room, assessing, judging, until suddenly, they stopped. On me. I dropped my gaze immediately, but the damage was done. I felt his attention like a physical touch, a phantom finger tracing my spine. My hands tightened on the tray until my knuckles whitened. Don't notice me. Please don't notice me. The dinner proceeded with excruciating slowness. I moved mechanically between the kitchen and the high table, serving wine with downcast eyes, never lingering. Yet each time I approached, I felt those silver eyes tracking my movements. Once, when I leaned forward to place a platter of roasted venison before him, his hand brushed mine, a touch that seemed deliberate in its casualness. I flinched back, nearly spilling the dish. "Careful," he murmured, his voice deep and smooth as aged whiskey. It was the first time I'd heard him speak, and something inside me responded to it, a flutter beneath my ribs like a caged bird testing its wings. I gave a quick nod without meeting his gaze and retreated. Hours later, when the plates had been cleared and the formal toast made, the dancing began. I used the opportunity to slip away to the kitchens, desperate for a moment's respite from the weight of the Alpha King's attention. I leaned against the cool stone wall, closing my eyes and drawing deep breaths. The pendant felt hot against my skin, a warning I couldn't ignore. Why does a serving girl wear silver of such fine craftsmanship? My eyes flew open. Alaric Gray stood in the kitchen doorway, his massive frame blocking the exit. We were alone. Panic clawed up my throat. I shook my head and gestured vaguely to my throat, the universal sign I'd used for years to indicate my muteness. He cocked his head, studying me with unsettling intensity. "Magnus tells me you've been with this pack for 3 years. Before that, no one knows where you came from." I shrugged, keeping my expression neutral despite the hammering of my heart. He took a step closer, then another. I pressed back against the wall, but there was nowhere to run. When he stood before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, he reached out. I flinched, but he merely touched the pendant at my throat. "This is a royal crest," he said softly, "from the northern packs that were decimated in the wars." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to speak, to defend, to explain. His silver eyes narrowed, and he leaned closer, inhaling deeply near my neck. I trembled as his nose traced the line of my throat, a traditional wolf greeting that was far too intimate coming from an Alpha King to a supposed serving girl. "You hide your scent well," he murmured against my skin, "but not well enough." My eyes widened in horror. He knew. Somehow he knew. "I've been searching for you for a very long time," he continued, straightening to his full height. "The last Omega of the northern packs. The one who disappeared the night her family was slaughtered." Tears burned behind my eyes. A decade of secrets threatened to unravel with each word he spoke. "Tomorrow, we will speak," he commanded softly. "And you will tell me why the rightful heir to the Northern Territories pretends to be a mute servant rather than claiming her birthright." He stepped back, and something in his expression shifted. A softening around the eyes, a curious vulnerability that seemed at odds with his power. "Until then, little ghost," he turned and left as silently as he'd arrived, leaving me shaking against the wall. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my tiny room in the servants' quarters, panic and possibility warring within me. He knew what I was. An Omega, yes, but also something more, the daughter of the slain Northern Alpha. A princess in hiding, presumed dead alongside her family. But he couldn't know everything. He couldn't know why I'd hidden my voice for so long, why I'd fled that blood-soaked night, with my grandmother's pendant clutched in my fist and her final warning echoing in my ears. They hunt Omegas for their voices, and they will hunt you most of all. As dawn broke over the mountains, I made my decision. By the time the Alpha King came looking for me, I would be gone, disappearing like the ghost he'd named me, leaving no trace for him to follow. I was halfway through packing my meager belongings when the screaming began. The screams tore through the early morning quiet. Panicked, desperate cries that sent ice through my veins. I abandoned my half-packed bag and rushed to my window, peering out at the courtyard below. Wolves in human form were running, some shifting mid-stride into their animal counterparts. Guards shouted orders, their voices tight with urgency. Through the chaos, I caught fragments of terrified conversation. Attacked at dawn. The border patrol. All dead, except... My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a random attack. 10 years of running had taught me to recognize the signs. They had found me again. The silencers. Hunters who trafficked in Omega wolves. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. If I fled now, in the middle of chaos, I might escape both the hunters and the Alpha King. But as I turned toward my pack, a pounding at my door froze me in place. Open up. By order of the Alpha King, my fingers instinctively flew to my grandmother's pendant. 3 sharp knocks followed, then the splintering of wood as the door was forced open. 2 royal guards stood in the doorway, their expressions grim. "You're to come with us," the taller one said. "Now." No time for resistance. They flanked me as we moved swiftly through the servants' corridors, past wide-eyed staff and warriors preparing for battle, not toward the main gates as I'd expected, but deeper into the pack house, down staircases I'd never been permitted to use, until we reached a heavy iron door. One guard pressed his palm to it, murmuring words in the ancient tongue. The door swung open to reveal a war room. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins and black lines. Around a massive oak table stood the Alpha leaders, their faces drawn with tension. At the head stood Alaric Grey, his powerful frame rigid as he bent over a map, silver eyes flashing as he issued commands. Those eyes found mine the moment I entered. Something passed across his face. Relief, perhaps, and something darker I couldn't name. "Leave us," he ordered. The room emptied immediately, the other Alphas filing out with curious glances in my direction. When the door closed behind the last of them, we were alone. "You were packing to run," he said. Not a question. I remained silent, clutching my pendant like a shield. "The same people who murdered your family have found you," he continued, circling the table toward me. "The silencers have been hunting Omegas for decades, but they've been particularly determined to find you." I took an involuntary step back, my shoulder blades pressing against the cold stone wall. "I need to know why." He stopped before me, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker gray in his silver irises. "I need to know what makes you so valuable that they would risk attacking a pack under my protection." The weight of 10 years of silence pressed upon me. I shook my head, gesturing to my throat in the familiar denial. His hand shot out, gently but firmly grasping my chin, tilting my face up to his. "No more pretending, little ghost. People are dying. My people, your people." Something broke inside me then. A dam holding back a decade of fear and loneliness. The first sound that escaped my lips was a ragged sob. "They want what's inside me," I whispered, my voice rusty from disuse. Speaking felt like swallowing glass, each word painfully formed after years of deliberate silence. The voice of an Omega is powerful, but mine is different. His eyes widened slightly at the sound of my voice, his thumb unconsciously stroking along my jawline. Different how? I closed my eyes, summoning courage from some hidden reserve. The northern packs had a prophecy about an Omega, born under a blood moon who would carry the voice of compulsion, not just to soothe Alphas, but to command them. His hand dropped from my face as though burned. That's impossible. No wolf can command an Alpha against their will. That's what my father believed. The memories rose unbidden. The night of crimson moonlight, the smell of pine and frost so similar to this place, the metallic tang of blood, until I accidentally commanded him to stop beating one of our pack members. He froze mid-strike, unable to move until I released him. Understanding dawned in Alaric's eyes. "So you ran not just from being claimed. I ran because my father planned to use me as a weapon," I finished. "And when he couldn't control me, he arranged to sell me to the silencers, who collect Omegas with unique abilities. The night they came, my grandmother helped me escape. Everyone assumed I died in the attack." The room fell silent, save for the distant sounds of preparation for battle. Alaric paced the length of the chamber, his brow furrowed in thought. "Show me," he finally said, turning to face me. I shook my head. "I won't use it. Not ever again. People are dying out there," he said, his voice low and intense. "If what you say is true, you could end this without bloodshed. Or I could become exactly what my father wanted, a weapon to be wielded by whoever controls me. I stepped away from the wall, finding strength in finally speaking my truth. The moment I use my voice, I expose myself to everyone. The silencers will never stop hunting me. Alaric ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration evident in the tense line of his shoulders. Then why did you stay in wolf packs at all? Why not disappear among humans? The question caught me off guard. It was something I'd asked myself countless times over the years. Because I'm still a wolf, I answered softly. And because I hoped to find a place where I could belong without being used. Something shifted in his expression. A softening that made him look suddenly younger, more vulnerable. He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. "What's your name?" he asked. "Your real name." I hesitated, understanding the power in such a simple question. Names had meaning among wolves. To share my true name was to offer trust I wasn't sure I could afford. "Lyra," I finally whispered. "Lyra Mooncrest." He repeated it, the syllables rolling off his tongue like a caress. "Lyra," then, surprising me completely, he took my hand in his much larger one, turning it palm up. With deliberate care, he pressed his lips to the center of my palm, an ancient gesture of sworn protection among royal wolves. "I swear on my crown and my life that I will not use you as a weapon," he said, his breath warm against my skin. "But I cannot stand by while my people die when you have the power to save them." His sincerity shook me. 10 years of running, of trusting no one, had not prepared me for the raw honesty in his silver eyes. Before I could respond, the door burst open. A blood-spattered warrior stumbled in, his eyes wild with battle fever. "They've breached the east wall," he gasped. "They have weapons, silver-tipped arrows. We've lost 12 already." Alaric straightened, the vulnerable man vanishing beneath the mantle of the Alpha King. "Evacuate the young and elderly through the tunnel system. All warriors to the east quadrant." The messenger nodded and disappeared. Alaric turned back to me, conflict clear in his expression. "Stay here," he commanded. "This room is warded. No one can enter without royal blood or permission." "You're going out there?" I asked, surprised by the surge of concern that flooded through me. A grim smile touched his lips. "I don't send my wolves where I won't go myself." He moved toward the door, but I caught his arm, the contact sending a jolt of awareness through my fingertips. "Wait," I said. "Take this." I slipped my grandmother's pendant over my head and pressed it into his palm. It's been a protection charm for generations. He stared at the silver crescent, then carefully tucked it into his pocket. "I'll return it to you when this is over." With that, he was gone, leaving me alone in the fortified chamber with nothing but my troubled thoughts. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The sounds of battle reached me even through the thick stone walls. Snarls, screams, the distinctive howls of wolves in pain. I paced the room like a caged animal, my newly reclaimed voice trapped in my throat. I could end this. I could stop the bloodshed with a few carefully spoken words, but at what cost? The decision was taken from my hands when the iron door swung open. I spun around, expecting Alaric, but instead found myself facing a stranger. A woman with hair the color of wheat and eyes like chips of green ice. Blood spattered her leather armor, and a cruel smile played across her lips. "The little Omega princess," she purred. "At last." Fear froze me in place. "How did you get in here?" She held up a bloody hand, revealing a deep cut across her palm. "Royal blood opens royal doors." "Did your grandmother never tell you about your father's half-sister, the one he banished for challenging his rule?" "My aunt. The one my grandmother had warned me about in whispered stories. The wolf who had aligned herself with the silencers out of spite and vengeance. You led them to my family," I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. "You helped them kill everyone I loved." "Not everyone," she countered, stepping closer. "I kept looking for you, for 10 long years. Why?" I backed away, my eyes darting around the room for a weapon, an escape route, anything. "Because you're the key, dear niece." Her smile widened. "The voice of compulsion, the power to command alphas. Can you imagine what that's worth? Kingdoms, territories, alliances,